Children of the Universe by Professor Dr. Ante Simonić. Chapter 5 Formation and Development of Life, an Invitation to Reflection. Biology occupies a position among the sciences at once marginal and central. Marginal because the living world constituting but a tiny and very special part of the universe, it does not seem likely that the study of living beings will ever uncover general laws applicable outside the biosphere. But if the ultimate aim of the whole of science is indeed, as I believe, to clarify humans' relationship to the universe, then biology must be accorded a central position, since of all disciplines it is the one that endeavors to go most directly to the heart of the problems that must be resolved before that of human nature can be framed in other than metaphysical terms. J. Monod. One of the most fascinating and significant phenomena in the world is life. Many processes interconnected by many forces. The delimitation between the macroscopic structure and the invisible is unclear because the macrostructure and microstructures form a complex whole with constituents which cannot be clearly separated. The difference between the animate and the inanimate is not revealed in the separate characteristics of the animate, but in the processes based on the totality of a living being. On our planet, life appears individually in a magnificent diversity of forms and sizes. Species differ in terms of behavior, reproduction, or feeding. On the one hand, life is recognized in simple texts, tropisms, and tactile perception. In the other, it is characterized by a combination of instinctive, intelligent, social, and ethic schemes of behavior. Natural processes are dialectic and they respect the principles of chemical architecture and cellular structure of living beings. Subatomic particles form atoms, which form molecules, which are connected into macromolecules and molecular superstructures. Basic substances formed in that way, i.e., biomolecules, unite in molecular aggregates, form organelles, which are an integral part of the cell, and cells unite in tissues and organs, which finally form organisms. Organisms live in groups and can further organize in larger communities, which together with an increasingly wider environment, unite everything that exists in the system of a biosphere. The material and the spiritual, the animate and the inanimate, the healthy and the sick, of usual or unusual forms, various sizes, composition, lifetime, consistency, color, taste, toxicity. As regards the chronology of their appearance, simpler forms precede the complex ones. Inorganic ones come before organic ones, and inanimate before animate, regardless of individual deviations. Regardless of individual deviations, the level of organization continuously increases, which results in the evolution of living beings, starting with protobionts, prokaryotes, protists, plants, fungi, and invertebrates, and stretching to primates and humans. A new evolutionary stage is accompanied by an increase in the following: multitude of substances and the complexity of the structure. Control, which is exercised by the whole over the parts in relation to the environment. Differences between organisms. Ability of the organism to survive and reproduce, and changes in the environment in which the organism lives. Safer survival is a driving force which directs biological evolution towards more complex, specialized, and coordinated systems for the purpose of more efficient supply and use of substances and energy, and more successful monitoring and regulation of the processes which include sustaining and safeguarding life and reproduction. As it develops and integrates, the theory of evolution is based on the philosophisms of evolutionary naturalism by R. W. Sellers, emergent evolutionism by L. Morgan and S. Alexander, axiomatic biology by J. H. Woodger, dialectical materialism by K. Marx and F. Engels, organic mechanicism by A. N. Whitehead, holism by J. C. Sunatz, cosmology by P. Haylard, the view of J. Needham, and so on. Each level of integration includes specific inner oppositions. In the society, this takes the form of a contrast between old, decaying elements and the new ones which are imposed. For instance, there are forces of attraction and repulsion in physics, birth and death in biology. Therefore, dialectics holds that a newborn synthesis usually moves up to a higher hierarchical level and includes factors of both opposing principles. This can serve as a basis for the interpretation of a formation of a higher organizational level, regardless of whether living beings and society, planets, or the universe are concerned. The collision of a thesis and an antithesis, for example, biological diversity and uniqueness of nature, results in evolution, a process which involves synthesis. The described processes are never absolute. Main integrative events are always accompanied by collateral events. They are to a greater or to a lesser extent quantitative, but from the qualitative point of view, they can be neutral, stimulating, or inhibitory for the main or one of the collateral events. Interactions can be momentary, lasting, monotonous, or intermittent, while the effects may be temporary, cumulative, or fluctuating. Chapter 5.1 Origin of Life. The basic existential question, how did life come to be, is left unanswered. The origin of life is a secret of our essence, interwoven in each attempt to understand one's origin and development, one's past, present, and future. The mystery of life is a challenge not only for science, but also for religion, philosophy, and art. The Bible says, "In the beginning was the world," logos, Greek for word, law, knowledge, "and the word renowned in the universe, churned up the sea, repeating itself forever." It discovered the way how to select and condense matters into the particle which will be extracted from the anthropic stream and become the seed of life. The Word transformed the barren surface of earth into a green paradise. Science has not discovered why and how the transformation from inanimate to animate matter occurred. Neither has it identified the driving force behind the process. However, not accepting the limitations of its cognition and persistent in finding answers, science has over time produced many hypotheses and theories. Most modern scientists consider that the laws of chemistry and physics are applicable to living processes, and they accept the theory which has been developing for the last 100 years. It is based on the common origin of life, enabled by material and energetic conditions out of which all life developed during gradual evolution. The dominant hypothesis presupposes the formation of life in four phases. 1. Nuclear evolution, which enabled the formation of the universe. 2. Physical evolution, which resulted in the formation of elements. 3. Chemical evolution, which resulted in the formation of biomolecules. 4. Biological evolution, which resulted in the formation and development of living beings. The view that the formation of life is a logical consequence of non-chemical and physical processes based on atomic composition of the universe resulted in the theory of gradual formation of life on Earth. According to that theory, life formed in special conditions. It came into being as a result of contact between Earth's surface and space environment, from the primordial soup, which contained all necessary elements. For many, similar interpretations are not distanced enough from the physicalism, the view that everything that exists can be reduced to physical and chemical processes. Namely, if we compare basic natural sciences, physics and chemistry, with biology, we find the first two are characterized by a lower level of complexity and a higher level of precision. This view is only conditionally true, and we are aware that these three sciences are interrelated. In other words, living organisms are composed of molecular complexes, which ensure life functions based on harmonized physical properties and chemical activities. However, if we reduce biology to chemical and physical processes, we ignore the biological essence of a complex living system, and we are still puzzled by many questions. Will we ever resolve the problem of the origin of life? And if we do, will we be able to form life in a test tube? Even if we succeed, what will follow? Chapter 5.2 Dying. Youth wanes year after year. The spring days are fugitive. The frail flowers die for nothing, and the wise man warns me that life is but a dewdrop on the lotus leaf. R. Tagore. Birth and death are not two different status, but they are different aspects of the same state. S. M. Gandhi. Death is a subject people are reluctant to talk about, regardless of the fact that it intrigues them a great deal. Conscious suppression of the problem of death is based on the fact that such a personal subject fills us with anxiety and disturbance. However, death is omnipresent, and through it, as an antipode of life, we realize our existence. Therefore, death is the subject of many mythological, religious, aesthetical, artistic, ethical, philosophical, and scientific discussions. Death is closely related to life, but do all living beings die? For example, unicellular organisms such as amoebas or bacteria can live forever because they live genetically through their offspring. Proliferated by cell division, the same organisms, actually offspring of the parts which are their genetic copy, who lived on our planet many millions of years ago, still live today. This form of life, which neither ages nor dies, which is not characterized by any significant biological diversity, was the only form of life for nearly 2/3 of biological evolution on Earth. However, about 1 million years ago, evolution accelerated, gender and death appeared, and many new forms of life were created. L. Schlann notes, there would be no diversity without gender and no individuality without death. We believe that only humans are aware of mortality. Theodosius Dobzhansky, 1900 to 1975, says, self-awareness is, then, one of the fundamental, possibly the most fundamental characteristic of the human species. This characteristic is an evolutionary novelty. Self-awareness, however, brought in its trained sober companions, fear, anxiety, and death awareness. Oswald Spengler, 1880 to 1936, himself holds a similar position. No one starts a war or goes to sea or even takes a walk without thinking of its duration and its ending. Every truly creative human being knows and fears the emptiness that follows upon the fulfillment of a work. The development belongs fulfillment. Every development has a beginning and every fulfillment is an end. To youth belongs age, to arising, passing, to life, death. For the animal, tied in the nature of its thinking to the present, death is known and scented as something in the future, something unthreatening. It only knows the fear of death in the moment of being killed. But humans, whose thought is emancipated from the feathers of here and now, yesterday and tomorrow, boldly investigates the wants of past and future, and so knows that death is coming. It depends on the depth of his nature and on his worldview as to whether he triumphs over his fear of the end or not. We do not know whether our ancient ancestor became aware of himself, but Dobzhansky considers that consciousness about dying is reflected in burial ceremonies. The oldest ceremonies we know of are related to the Neanderthals in Palestine about 100,000 years ago. Warning about the brevity of life, Zhuangzi concludes, a human's life between heaven and earth, like a rapid white horse jump over a crevice, a moment, and she flew. Refuting the thoughts about the brevity of life and the absolute end, human has strived from ancient times to find different solutions for moving away from death. The belief in mortality has been glorified, so, for instance, it is considered that our life continues through our children or works. That is, we are blended with the unity in which we participate. The laws of karma are applied, so some believe in reincarnation, the belief that we are to be born again. That is, the belief in mortality of the spirit while the physical body is lost, and resurrection, Semitic model of the indestructibility of the soul and the producibility of the body. Does the supporters of apologetics not consider immortality as the biggest gift from God, and does the tradition of many nations not hold that the dead continue their lives in a secret way as shadows, ghosts, spirits, and so on? For instance, the Jews and ancient Greeks believed in the existence of the land of the dead, Sheol and Hades, which is the foundation of the beliefs about the grave as the place of the deceased's life. Immortality of the soul is not always regarded in the abstract sense. The soul is sometimes assigned a form and even materiality. There are speculations about the possibility of metaphysics, according to which the soul leaves the body of the deceased but can return to the same body or to be transferred to another body, and similar. According to Plato, death is the separation of the soul from the body. Plotin adds that the soul attains the state of pure virtue, but Epicurus disagrees with his materialistic view that physical death necessarily extinguishes all physical functions, and adds, death does not concern us, because as long as we exist, death is not here, and when it does come, we no longer exist. Early Christian thinkers, Tertullian and St. Augustine, interpret death as punishment for the original sin, but their successors, St. Thomas Aquinas and Duns Scotus, note that the soul proceeds into the eternal life, and the body returns to the matter out of which it was created. Descartes said, "A free man thinks of nothing less than of death, and his wisdom is a meditation, not on death, but on life." Engels notes that death is an essential moment of life, and living means dying. Hegel considers death as superior generality attained by individuals. Schopenhauer says that birth and death are the vibration of the eternal idea, because one world collapses with the death of a man, but only the one he carried in his mind. Death as the second part of life, in the sense of a spiritual existence, which is expressed in the conceptual influence on new generations after the death of an author, was advocated by many other philosophers and artists. For instance, Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900, does not consider death an important but banal event, and cynically instructs, "Many, if they do not succeed in life, must strive to succeed in death." On the other hand, Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Marcel, Camus, and other existentialists proclaimed death the most significant problem of philosophy. They consider that human existence cannot be defined by means of a final rational determinant, and that the most representative way for humans to prevent oneself is by means of his or her possibilities, claiming that every individual must keep overcoming or transcending one's own actual state, and since death is perceived as the final instance of future, existentialists assign to death the fundamental value. Freud's research revolved around death, and in most interpretations of death, one can see a close interrelation between emotional or irrational and rational considerations. An individual living being, humans included, is not only an individual's own present and past, but also contains the history of one's own species. Regardless of the personal experience of life of each individual, because of the fact that each individual is unique, the appearance of consciousness brought the responsibility of the individual for the whole as well as the sense of human history. Therefore, the death of a human does not only mean that actual information about him or her is lost, but one's entire participation in the overall history is lost as well. By losing his or her consciousness, the dead person also loses one's past and the information which was gathered within the person as a deposit of the overall history of one's species. In our search for the dead person caused by the fact that we are used to this person and he or she is no longer present, leaving behind only traces composed of a small quantity of carbon, water, salt, iron, calcium, phosphorus, and similar. Does it mean that there is no symmetry between birth and death, and that all our considerations on death are only products of imagination because this is the event which never took place within us, so we cannot have any personal experience thereof? Our experience is mostly the experience of our own species. The existence of the individual stops at death, but the species outlives it. It is clear that the principle of life, surpassing the individual, is realized in the species, but can also surpass a species since a species too can become extinct. Therefore, we see the principle of life as a general experience of all living beings as well. Several approaches to death can be observed. For instance, for some people, death was often a holy ceremony realized in the name of the transition to another form of life. For Brahmins, death is returning to nullity and uniting with the only God. Death for some other people is often considered not only as the end of a single mind, but as an end to the sense of the world. Death after a serious illness or a difficult life is regarded as a natural necessity and usually is not terrifying. We often perceive death as a limiting factor which reduces our time because we will not live to see our grandchildren or great-grandchildren or the turn of the third millennium to the fourth. We are rarely troubled by the fact that we will not see distant areas of our planet or, for instance, of the Milky Way. Why there is an asymmetry in the perception of death against the time and space continuum. Ruya considers that it is because we are as old as the world and we recognize it from the perspective of time as intimate. In contrast, we were never as extensive as the cosmos, so we regard it as alien to us.